Legend has it that deep in the Dovre Mountains of Awaken, Norway, there is an ancient giant monster that has been sleeping for 1,000 years. He is hundreds of feet tall, with a body made of mountain rocks, snow covering his heart, and bones as cold as ice. He dances with the fall of night and sleeps under the sunlight. Many people dismiss him as just a fairy tale to scare children. That was until the government decided to build a railroad there. A blasting crew blew through the ancient mountains. The massive sound of the explosion awakened a mysterious species. A demonic roar echoed from the depths of the dust-filled cave. Terrified team members fled in all directions. In the end, no one at the scene survived. The incident quickly alarmed the military high command. They dispatched 2 Air Force reconnaissance planes to the site immediately. Photos taken from the air showed that something seemed to have burst out of the ground. Huge craters resembling footprints were also discovered nearby. The military quickly reported the incident to the Prime Minister. When she saw the live video from the scene, she was shocked and ordered her advisor. She told him to immediately gather geologists, archaeologists, and biologists. They had to find out exactly what kind of thing had escaped. Before long, a helicopter landed in front of the paleontologist, Nora. The soldiers who stepped down stated the government high command summoned her urgently. "It is a matter of national security, so you need to come with us right now." Nora, completely confused, was brought to a secret base. The Prime Minister's advisor received her in person. Everywhere she looked, staff members were busy working. She did not know what was happening at that moment. The advisor led her into a conference room. It was filled with high-ranking government officials. The advisor introduced her as the paleontology expert, Nora. After Nora sat down, military officials said they couldn't rule out new weapons or terrorist attacks. Everyone made different guesses based on the scene. Nora, looking at the footage, stated directly, "Can't you all see those craters are giant footprints?" The room fell silent instantly after those words. It wasn't that they hadn't had such guesses, but what kind of creature could leave such massive footprints? While they were arguing incessantly, the military made a new discovery. They cracked the footage recovered from a victim's phone. In the video, a massive explosion suddenly occurred at the cave entrance. Many innocent people were buried by rocks in an instant. Everyone present showed a heavy expression at this scene. Nora asked them to replay it one more time. Then, she pointed at a frame and shouted for them to pause. A giant humanoid creature appeared vaguely in the video. The meeting room fell into a dead silence. Meanwhile, in a farmhouse in the Gudbrandsdalen Valley, a woman in the house suddenly heard a strange sound. As that eerie sound grew louder, the coffee on the table began to vibrate. The 2 people also felt something was wrong at that moment. As the wall decorations fell off, the old man opened the basement entrance in a panic. He thought it was an earthquake, so they hurried inside to hide. As the light bulb went out, the 2 fell into darkness. After a while, they were stunned by the scene when they opened the hatch. More than half of their home had turned into ruins. A giant footprint was left on the ground nearby. The government soon learned of what happened here. The Prime Minister sent the advisor to accompany Nora to the scene for a careful investigation. They arrived at the scene escorted by a helicopter. Special Forces Captain Chris greeted them. He told them something came from that direction. It crossed rivers and through valleys. The footprints disappeared 20 kilometers to the south. Nora questioned the 2 survivors of the accident. The old man said he only felt the ground shaking. It was as if they were covered by the shadow of an entire mountain. Moreover, it was a mountain that could move. Looking at the devastated scene, Nora became more certain it was a giant creature. She went down into the crater to look for clues. However, the only things left at the scene were soil and rocks. So Nora decided to go south to where the footprints disappeared. Looking down from the helicopter, a giant humanoid mountain seemed to be lying where the prints vanished. Yet the military instruments had already scanned the area and found no signs of life. Nora asked the helicopter to turn and go to another place. This old man holding a gun was her father. He was treated as mentally ill just because he was obsessed with ancient legends. The father let them into the house only when Nora said she wasn't there to take him to the hospital. The room was covered with various strange photos. The old man had spent half his life researching these things. He was an absolute expert in the field of ancient legends. Nora hoped to get some help from her father. She showed the video to her father. Seeing such massive footprints, the old man said this thing is very similar to the Norwegian troll from 1,000 years ago. The daughter thought her father was starting to tell those myths again. Seeing that Nora didn't believe him, the old man prepared to go to the scene with his daughter. On the helicopter, he judged that the giant monster was still nearby, based on where the footprints disappeared. The old man found a spot for the helicopter to land. He was jumping around mysteriously on the spot. The three of them looked on with some helplessness. After a while, Nora went over to ask if he found anything. The father told her the landscape here was a bit wrong, because the map showed this place should be a hillside, but now a mountain appeared for no reason. Just as Nora was about to say something, she suddenly smelled an extremely primal scent. She quickly pulled out her notebook to check, and at that moment, a giant eye opened behind them. Nora looked back with a sense of premonition and was stunned by what she saw. The rocky mountain nearby began to crawl. A massive beast slowly stood up. The two of them fled into the helicopter in panic. The giant monster in front of them revealed its true face. This eerie thing looked like a giant goblin. He roared at the helicopter in the sky. This scene was also synchronized in real time to the secret base. A group of officials was stunned. Only then did Nora believe that her father was not crazy. His years of research were not groundless. In the military base, the old man said angrily, if the railroad construction hadn't disturbed him, this adult ancient giant wouldn't have woken up at all. Much less would he hurt humans randomly. After a few words, the Minister of Defense became angry. He ordered the soldiers to take the old man away. Nora asked the Prime Minister for time. She said she would investigate what kind of creature this was. The other party said the risk was too high. They had already ordered the army to prepare to destroy the giant monster, but the three of them did not want to give up. They begged Chris to take them along. After a moment of hesitation, the captain agreed to the request. At night, various armored vehicles and tanks began to gather. They set up an ambush on the monster's path. As the drones were launched, the live footage was synchronized to the Prime Minister. The government officials also watched all this nervously through the screen. However, they waited for a long time without any sign of the monster. Just as the soldiers were getting sleepy, that giant monster appeared in the mountain forest. He seemed to sense danger and stopped. At this time, high-ranking military officials also ordered to fire immediately. 2 shells exploded on the monster's body, but when the smoke cleared, the giant monster was unharmed. Next, tanks began to fire shells at the giant monster. Even so, the powerful heavy weapons could not cause a single bit of damage to it. Instead, it was completely enraged. Seeing this, the captain shouted for the soldiers to retreat. The entire combat scene was very chaotic. With the giant monster's counterattack, the live broadcast signal was lost. In the terrified eyes of the crowd, the giant monster swallowed a soldier into his mouth. A few people turned and fled in terror, but at this time, Nora's father suddenly raised his hand. He approached the giant monster bit by bit. The giant monster looked at him. It seemed to feel the old man's kindness and did not attack him. Just as his emotions were gradually calming down, a surviving soldier behind began to shoot at him. The bullets made the giant monster's emotions violent again. That strong tail swept the old man several meters away directly, and the soldier who fired was stepped flat. After doing all this, the giant monster did not continue to attack but turned and left. At this time, the old man was dying. He said something to his daughter before he died. Then he closed his eyes. It took Nora a long time to calm the grief of losing her father. She saw in the notebook left by her father. In ancient times, people used the sound of church bells to drive away giant monsters, because giant monsters can be immune to thermal weapons. This discovery gave them a new idea. At this time, the giant monster had walked into a forest park. As soon as that huge and terrifying body appeared, the tourists in the park fled in panic. And at this moment, 4 helicopters carrying large bells flew from afar. They surrounded the giant monster from 4 corners. The sound of the bells seemed to have a strange, penetrating power. It made the giant monster hold its head in pain. It seemed that this was somewhat effective. But before they could be happy for long, the giant monster grabbed a cabin. He threw it hard at one of the helicopters. The hit aircraft shook and crashed into the woods and exploded. Then 2 more planes were destroyed by the giant monster. However, one of the falling planes actually fell toward a little girl below. The girl's father ran over and hugged his daughter tightly. At this moment, the giant monster actually reached out and caught the falling plane. The father and daughter managed to survive. This scene was just seen by Nora and the others. The giant monster looked at the father protecting his daughter. It seemed to touch some emotion in his heart. He crushed the plane in his hand as a show of force to Nora and the others. Then he turned and walked slowly in another direction. The news of a mountain troll appearing in Norway quickly alarmed the media. In an instant, It hit the #1 spot on the world's trending lists. They followed and reported one after another. The Prime Minister held an emergency press conference. She said the government was working hard to control the situation. The situation would improve very soon. She hoped everyone would not spread rumors, much less panic. Military personnel would evacuate the masses effectively and safely. At this time, the evacuated Nora thought of her father's last words again. This time she understood her father's intention. She asked the advisor to take her to the royal palace. An old man named Sinding received them. He seemed to have been waiting for a long time. He was not surprised at all to see Nora arrive. During the conversation, Sinding showed great respect for Nora's father. The old man took them deep into a cave under the royal palace. This place was discovered during underground engineering construction in the 1920s. It was filled with massive skeletons. It turned out this was once the home of the Troll King. 1,000 years ago, the Norwegian king St. Olaf slaughtered all the giant monsters, but they let one descendant of the giant monsters go. They lured him deep into the Dover Mountains. Then they imprisoned him and left him to fend for himself. The one woken up by the construction team now is the descendant of that giant monster. Since waking up, he has been trying to return to the castle, which is now the royal palace. He just simply wanted to go home. When Nora shone a UV light on one of the skeletons, the bone being illuminated turned into rock quickly. The woman thought of that ancient proverb passed down for 1,000 years. They dance with the night and freeze in the sunlight. It's not that giant monsters can't move during the day, they just cannot appear under sunlight. It happened to be cloudy these past few days. Nora thought of a way to deal with the giant monster. By now, the giant monster had arrived in the city. The army fired at him again. However, it was all in vain. Seeing the situation becoming more and more out of control, high-ranking government officials decided to use nuclear weapons to completely destroy the giant monster. Sigrid passed this news to the advisor. The man asked her to hack the system to block the nuclear missile launch, to buy time for their plan. Although this sounds hard to believe, the woman had great confidence in her skills. On the other side, the Chris team also received Nora's plan. They had prepared large UV searchlights. Now, the city was already empty. The piercing air raid sirens echoed through the entire sky. The bombers carrying live nuclear rounds had locked onto the target. With an order from the military high command, the missile launch entered the countdown. At the critical moment, Sigrid successfully stopped the launch. This bought precious time for Nora. Seeing the giant monster aggressively about to reach the royal palace, she drove a car carrying a huge skeleton and rushed directly over. Seeing that skeleton on the car that belonged only to his kind, the giant monster turned in anger and chased the two quickly. All obstacles along the way were destroyed, one by one. Fortunately, the trap set by the Chris team was also about to be completed. They were just waiting for Nora to lure the monster over. When Nora drove over a curb, the skeleton carried on the car actually fell to the ground. At this time, the giant monster had walked in front of the skeleton. He gently picked up the bone and placed it in his palm. There seemed to be tears shimmering in those eyes. Bursts of mournful wails came from his mouth until he saw the glass nearby. This was the first time the giant monster saw himself. He poked it curiously with his finger. The fragile glass shattered all over the ground instantly. Being startled, the skeleton in his hand also accidentally fell to the ground. The giant monster's roar echoed through the entire sky. He vented all his anger on the two people in front of him. Feeling things were not right, Nora reversed the car frantically. The enraged giant monster flipped the entire bridge directly. At this time, the Minister of Defense discovered the secret of Sigrid in the base. He went forward and grabbed the computer from Sigrid's hand directly. Knowing the truth, he was furious. And Nora was also about to reach the set trap. Behind her was that giant monster chasing relentlessly. She told the advisor to jump out of the car directly, and she also escaped at the moment the giant monster's palm arrived. At this time, the monster was already inside the UV light trap. Strong lights turned on. In an instant, the monster was in extreme pain from the UV radiation. After restoring the system, the nuclear missile was about to be launched again. However, the pilot saw civilians at the scene. The military officer ordered to terminate the launch. At this time, the Minister of Defense was relentless. He stubbornly ordered that it must be launched. That damn monster must be blown to pieces, even at the cost of sacrificing civilians. Seeing him act willfully, Sigrid knocked him to the ground with one punch. The launch mission was terminated. At the scene, Nora looked at the giant monster sinking into painful wails. She felt pity in her heart. What did he do wrong? He just wanted to go home. Nora cut the power to the UV lights directly. She shouted at the monster. She told him to leave this place. Go back to the mountains. Go back to a safe place. However, a ray of sunlight shone on him at this moment. The giant monster's body began to petrify. This monster that was immune to swords and spears just fell under the sunlight. As his eyes slowly turned into rock, the giant monster's life withered away completely. The entire body turned into a small mountain. At this point, the movie ends.